Welcome back to Astro Auto Styling. I'm Lucas, and today we're going to be wrapping this Audi A4. Right off the bat, when we look at this car, obviously it does not look like a normal A4. Now, I've taken apart the bumper a bit, so we do have the original parts for that. But these gigantic wheels, obviously it looks a bit odd. There are fender flares that we're going to put on after to make sure we get that flush fitment. There's areas of bodywork that have been done, all been sanded down nice and smooth. We have the custom exhaust on the back. Looking at the vehicle, there's nothing that jumps out at me that this is going to be extremely difficult. There are these little areas here, these rivet holes that we're going to have to cut around to make sure that the kit fits nicely. The roof is a little different because the side of the vehicle and the roof, typically there's some type of molding or trim between them to separate them. That doesn't exist here. So because we're going to do the roof black and we're going to do the body gray, a light gray, the black roof is going to come up to here. We're going to use our knifeless tape right along here to create a nice edge. And then when we use the body color, we'll do that over top and create a nice seam that is hidden by this body line here. So that's the plan of attack. Like I said, doesn't look too bad. I might eat those words, but let's get started wrapping. I always start with the hood or roof of the vehicle because it's easier to work from the top down. So like every other panel, we're going to glass this out. And after it's glassed, we take our squeegee and we use overlapping strokes to make sure we get all of the air out from underneath the vinyl. Next, we move on to trimming, and this is important because having very clean lines and clean cuts is kind of what separates you from other installers. People will notice that kind of detail in your work. So having a bit of tension when you're cutting the film allows you to get that straight line. And the important thing to remember is you don't need to wrap 2 inches around these edges. Even a quarter of an inch is plenty and gives you a very, very clean finish. As we look at the underside of the hood here, there's not that much material wrapped around the edge, but it's a very clean line and clean cut all the way around the hood. Moving on to the fenders, because of the wide body kit, I would need to cut on the paint during this install. I really didn't feel like doing that, so I ran some knifeless tape just for peace of mind, and then I cut away the excess vinyl before I began glassing out the film. This is good because these pieces can be used for mirrors or inlays or anything else that you need later, and it also helps you from having to wrestle with extra pieces of vinyl that you just don't need. Okay, bumpers. Now these are everyone's favorite. Obviously, this is way easier to do with two people, but you just need some patience if you're doing it by yourself. So as you see here, when I do this, I kind of work the vinyl in small sections and I cold stretch. So I don't use my heat gun. I don't want to pick up this whole piece because if I do that, I just risk getting dirt and dust behind the film. So if I can do a cold stretch first, I like doing that. Once you reach that point in the bumper where it starts to bend, then you take your heat gun and heat up a large area. And as you're pulling around the bumper, make sure to separate your hands to get rid of all those wrinkles. Once you've glassed out the bumper as best you can, get rid of those remaining wrinkles as quickly as possible. And then the rest of the install is just like any other panel. Right now, I'm just prepping this side of the vehicle to wrap it, and I'm going to show you the steps I go through before I actually start wrapping the car. So first, if you come over here, you might notice the mirror is still on. 99% of the time, I will always take the mirror off. But in this scenario, if we look at this door, you'll see we have some crazy door panels. So the customer didn't want me to take it apart. I said, that's fine, I don't have to. As you'll see, the mirror sits above this little trim piece. So I can just tuck under that. The mirror doesn't have to come out. If it was in line with that and I couldn't tuck under, that mirror would have to come out. I've also taped off all of the plastic trim. This is just going to help us when we need to tuck behind here and tuck behind here. It reduces how much the vinyl sticks to the surfaces you don't want it to stick to. So it helps in that sense. Again, it comes all the way over here. So all that trim has been taped off. It really helps when you're tugging, guys. I really recommend putting the tape. In the door, you'll see here, we have our knifeless tape. Okay, and we have this knifeless tape because we're doing a lighter color, and as I always say, right now you can see gray through this little gap. So you have to wrap in. If you just cut on this edge here when you're wrapping, you won't have enough to wrap in. So we put the knifeless tape there, and then we can trim properly and get full coverage. So right now, what you're gonna see me do is I'm going to lay one giant sheet of vinyl across the whole car, and then I'm going to cut out the doors and the skirt. So this skirt all along here, as you'll see, is all one piece, right? It goes all the way around. So we're gonna cut the doors out of that. You might notice when I do that, I have a lot of extra vinyl towards the front of the vehicle, because the way I do the math in my head is I basically want 3 inches of extra material on each end of every panel that I'm doing. So for example, for this quarter, I want 3 extra inches this way to help me tuck in. For the door, I need 3 inches on this side of the door and this side of the door. And then for the front door, I need 3 inches on either side. So that side and that side. If we add it all up, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So the material theoretically should go 15 inches past the end of this door, if I've measured correctly. And that will give us plenty of extra material that when I'm cutting out this quarter and cutting out the pieces for the doors, that I don't have to worry about making sure it's exactly the right cut, like precise, because it's pretty hard to be that precise on a giant panel like that. So if you give yourself some tolerances on either end, it's just safer to do it that way. As I'm unrolling this vinyl, this dolly is incredibly useful. So if you have something like this, you just need something to help keep the vinyl off the floor. Then once it's positioned correctly, you're holding it in place with magnets. I'm feeling for the gaps between the panels. So first I'm feeling for the gap between the door and the rocker, and I use about a 2-finger width or 2-finger space between that gap to help me cut the vinyl properly. So I continue that 2-finger width or that 2-finger space all the way across just above the rocker. Then I get to the rear door and continue that 2-finger space all the way up the door. Once you've cleared the doors and you're up into that space near the windows, you're able to cut straight across. Because the vinyl is flexible, you're able to bend that straight piece that you've cut for up top. You're able to bend that down towards the hood and follow the correct curve. Then you can take your remaining piece that we just cut out and use that to cut pieces for the 2 doors. Again, this is the most efficient way to use your material, and if you're using your material efficiently, you're making more money.